Hello and welcome all you ladies and germs, and welcome to my new and improved Top 10 Wanted Death Battles. But first, let me give you a few disclaimers going into this. First off, this is a list detailing the battles that I want to see moving forward, not the ones that other people think are really good or even matchups. The second disclaimer relates to the first, because in my first Top 10 Wanted Death Battles list, it really wasn't my honest opinion. Frankly, I don't care about Darkseid vs. Thanos, since I didn't grow up reading comics. I just put it in the last video solely based off its popularity. That is not what I'm doing this time. This time, I'm showing you the fights I want. This time, I'm not going to try to pander to people just to give you a reason to care about me. This time, you'll see my genuine, honest opinion. The final disclaimer is that there is one series, be it game, comic, or show, that's featured in this list twice, despite my one fighter per series rule. I liked both potential matchups too much to overlook, so I did both instead. I'll leave you guys to guess which series that is. But without further ado, allow me to present to you my top 10 death battles for 2018. Number 10. Along with my honest opinion was bound to come at least one obscure matchup, and while I can say my tastes in matchups has gotten better, some may find this one a bit surprising. Those of you who watched my teasers leading up to this video already know about Spinal, but who could he fight? Let's hit that random button and see what it gives us. Sir Daniel Fortescue. You might say, huh? Well, what about Ermac from Mortal Kombat? While they may share some amount of abilities as well, both being undead, I don't really like the visual aesthetic going into that one. Well, how about Cruel from Vainglory? I'm sorry to say, but this matchup wasn't included for the fact that Vainglory isn't a game that I often play, and from what I've seen, not even that extremely well known of a game to begin with. That leaves two possibilities: Cervantes de Leon from Soul Calibur, or Sir Daniel Fortescue from Medieval. Sir Daniel is a better matchup for the visual aesthetic the fight could have, but Cervantes seems like a more reasonable and evenly matched opponent. This is where my own personal biases begin to influence my opinion. Since I've never played nor cared about Soul Calibur, I can't bring myself to say that it's my 10th most wanted death battle. So now we're left with Spinal versus Sir Daniel Fortescue. This fight is a very interesting one, if only for the differences between the characters. Sir Daniel is easily the better of the two in pure versatility, capable of keeping no less than 30 items on him at all times. Of those weapons, he possesses the Hero Sword and Woden's Brand. It's much more common to see him wielding the Hero Sword, but Woden's Brand does indeed have better stats between the two swords. And to counter this, Spinal has a completely average cutlass. Now, Spinal's strength doesn't come from the power of his weapons, rather it comes from his magical abilities, such as summoning giant skeleton hands and shooting skeleton heads. He does, however, possess a couple of shields, one of which being the Buckler Shield, which has a big protruding spike on it, and the other being the Kraken Shield, which possesses magical enhancements. This allows it to be practically indestructible and capable of absorbing projectiles. Sir Daniel, on the other hand, has 3 shields. 1 bronze, 1 silver, and 1 gold. They all have durability that scales as you'd expect, bronze being weakest and gold being strongest. But the gold also has the added benefit of absorbing projectiles as well. Greatest conductor indeed. Dan is also capable of using the Anubis Stone, which appears to have the ability to drain life force away from enemies inside its radius. In the end, though, I'd have to go with Sir Daniel for the victory on this one, as his vast arsenal allows him better control over the fight, and he could kill Spinal using the Anubis Stone or his Warhammer, whereas Spinal would be really hard-pressed to put this skeletal knight down. Number 9. And here we are again with another surprise of a matchup. I already teased Star Butterfly as one of the combatants, and many of you likely already know her opponent from my last top 10 list. But let's hit the random button regardless. Steven Universe. This probably won't really surprise any of you, but it might be a bit much for some. This fight only achieved an honorable mention in the last list, since both combatants are, indeed, children. Steven is 14 years old, and Star has just turned 15 years old within her own canon. For this list, however, I believed that it was still worth putting on the list, and instead just ranked it a little bit lower than normal. If it weren't for their age, this probably would reach number 5. As for the other matchups, however, Jenny is a fun idea, simply for the technology versus magic angle, but Star has too many advantages in just raw power. Starfire is more practical, but I think Starfire is way too experienced to fall for anything Star can think of. Twilight is actually pretty interesting, and after hearing of the matchup, I genuinely would like to see that sometime in the future. Just not as much as I'd like to see her against Steven. This matchup is actually a lot closer than I originally thought, because although Star is capable of a lot of really impressive magical feats, including multiple separate energy beams, shown to have incredible destructive capability, Steven's shield has somewhat recently been shown to be reflective, which in other words means that he could actually reflect almost every single spell that Star can shoot at him, maybe excluding the Narwhal Blast. That doesn't mean that it's a complete win for Steven, though. Star still does have the mobility advantage, now that she has access to her butterfly form whenever she needs it. She also does have the advantage in pure destructive capability. Now going over to Steven, he has the obvious advantage of pure physical strength, and he also has the edge in durability. Now there is some debate to be had about which one of these characters has the better speed, and with what I've seen, I would give the edge to Steven, but at the same time, Star really isn't a pushover as far as that goes. Her butterfly form does come with a lot of mobility, and with that mobility comes a good deal of speed as well. I have to say, of all the fights on this list, this is the hardest one to decide a victor for, since their abilities aren't one-to-one. Star uses magical attacks, whereas Steven mostly uses defense to his advantage. I did mention earlier how Steven has the durability and strength advantages, since it's repeatedly hinted that Star is essentially a normal human in durability. Now, there's no way to tell if her butterfly form ups her durability at all, so for now, I'll assume that it does not. Steven's strength and durability feats both come from his fight with Bismuth, as he both withstood her throwing an obsidian statue at him, then managed to throw that same statue back. Now this statue does seem to have the same size and shape to an average gem, a little bit smaller than Bismuth herself. Steven Universe as a show doesn't have any concrete sizing. This is so that they can change the character's heights at any time and sort of get away with it. It also makes it very hard to measure this in specific numbers. But assuming the average gem has the volume of an above-average human, and knowing that the density of obsidian is 2.6 grams per centimeter squared, which, funny enough, is actually less than that of quartz itself, which sits at 2.65 grams per cubic centimeter, we can determine this to weigh about 544 pounds. For a battle like this, that type of strength is very helpful and very useful for Steven to have here. I'm not even going to try and get into how much force that would be to withstand. That's just too much work for me. I have a schedule here. The ultimate question when it comes to this fight is whether Steven would be able to withstand all the things coming at him from Star long enough to whittle down her durability. It's also worth noting that Steven has a healing ability, whereas Star has shown no form of regeneration or healing. It might sound like I'm leaning towards Steven here for the victory, but in reality it is very even, as Star's magic is sure to keep Steven on edge and likely deplete his energy, as has been shown happening a few times throughout Steven Universe's runtime. As fascinating as that was, I think it's time we got back to video games. Let's leave these shows to their own nuttiness for a while. Alright? Alright. Number 8. back to the semi-normalcy of video games. And who can talk about video games without mentioning the most popular game of the last 10 years? I'm talking about League of Legends. And today we're going to discuss one character who just might be the silliest, craziest, most psychopathic character in fiction. We're talking about Jinx. But who's a suitable matchup for her? Let's hit the button and find out. Junkrat. Now, if you asked me who should fight Jinx last February, I would have said Harley Quinn, but that matchup just really doesn't seem fair, as Jinx has much easier access to her full arsenal of explosives, and Harley only has basic guns and a single bazooka. I also entertained two other ideas, however, I never really agreed with them. Heavy from Team Fortress 2 doesn't have any explosives at all, and isn't crazy in the same way as Jinx. She wants to see the world burn, and he just really likes guns. Nora Valkyrie is way too durable for a fight with Jinx. Also, again, she is not crazy in the same way. Junkrat, however, he's insane in just the right way, wanting to blow up everything he sees, even when it's not necessarily in his best interest. They also share their use of explosives with each other, making for a unique dynamic if this were to be a fight. They both have abilities that trap their opponents, locking them in place, and with Heroes of the Storm, they both now have giant rockets that they can ride into battle. Admittedly, Jinx usually sends it ahead of herself, while Junkrat uses his as an actual kamikaze attack. If this attack were to miss Jinx or not kill her, then she would easily be able to finish him off. Junkrat also does possess his Riptire, powerful remote-controlled explosive. Leaves Junkrat vulnerable while he's using it, but in a 1v1 scenario, it probably wouldn't matter much. Junkrat also has his concussive mine, but in an ideal situation, it would be no more effective than his normal grenades, other than to launch himself high up. Jinx has multiple weapons as well. Her two main guns, Pow Pow and Mr. Fishbones, a mini minigun and a rocket launcher respectively, her Flame Chomper mines, which I previously mentioned, and her shock pistol, obviously electrocutes enemies and slows them down temporarily. With all this in mind, I think Jinx has the upper hand, as she would have a much easier time hitting Junkrat than he would have hitting her. All those useful abilities of his lose their use when she is a match for every single one. Not to mention, while Jinx is crazier than Junkrat, she's much smarter than him. In fact, Junkrat's kind of an idiot. So in the end, Jinx has the more usable weaponry and the greater intelligence necessary to beat Junkrat. So now, let's move on. Number 7. For this next matchup, I went a little bit out of my comfort zone, but only a little. In fact, I think research for this actually expanded my comfort zone. The first character I teased for this new video was Agent 47 from the Hitman series. And here he is. But who could be a suitable match? I feel it's obvious, but you might not, so let the tension build as we find out who 47 will fight today. James Bond. Solid Snake and Sam Fisher are way too technologically advanced for 47 to realistically stand a chance against them. Aiden Pierce from Watch Dogs isn't nearly experienced enough to fight him. That's it. So what's the perfect middle ground? 007. I wouldn't call what they have a rivalry per se, but Hitman makes many nods towards Bond's crazy adventures, acknowledging the existence of the series. In this fight, Bond likely has the greater experience, having gone toe-to-toe with many incredible fighters in his time, while 47 mostly just deals with ordinary people. Mostly. 47 definitely has the greater physical abilities, reaction time, strength, speed, etc. But where Bond regains his footing is in his gadgetry, specifically his watch, which has way more functionality than it has any right to. It can function as a grappling hook, a miniature buzzsaw, a laser to cut locks, it has triggered explosives, a super magnet, and much, much more. 47 can only bring so many gadgets with him on any given mission, limiting his options quite a deal. He normally dual wields 2 silenced ICA silver baller pistols, hardballer if you want to get specific, though he is capable of using any weapon he comes across, and carries fiber wire on him at almost all times. He also possesses many different types of explosives, my favorite of which being his explosive rubber ducks. Bond also owns many different guns, including many different pistol types, and a couple of more heavy-duty firearms. In the end, I believe 47 would be the victor here. Despite Bond's IQ of 200, 47 was genetically modified to be the greatest killer he could be. This gives him abnormally accurate instincts, which gives off an impression that he can see through walls in the games. Not to mention that 47 is a slightly more accurate marksman than Bond is, able to make tough shots with inadequate equipment, whereas Bond failed to accomplish the same. Despite all that, I believe that this is a very close fight, and would be sure to entertain if it ever did come around. Number 6. Sticking with our secret agent theme we're on right now, let's look at the Spy from Team Fortress 2. Who's a good opponent for him? A highly trained assassin prided on his anonymity and cunning? Let's find out. Sombra. Hoxton is far too ordinary of a person to stand against Spy for any extended period of time, what with Spy's gadgetry and invisibility, disguises, and everything. Reaper's Wraith form gives him way too much control during the fight, and if you went with characters as shown outside of the game, as Death Battle has in the past, Reaper can Wraith form whenever and for however long as he wants. So that leaves Sombra. Spy and Sombra both have cloaking abilities, and are meant to attack their enemies swiftly from behind. For this fight, Sombra would easily outmaneuver Spy, since her cloak greatly increases her speed, and her translocator allows near instant teleportation. Spy, on the other hand, possesses the greater range, as Sombra's SMG loses effectiveness very quickly at range, while Spy's pistols have minimal damage fall-off. Spy also has more versatility, having many melee and ranged weapons, while Sombra only has close quarters combat and her SMG. Sombra could reasonably hack anything which uses electricity, which includes Spy's watches and likely the Sapper. Spy's Sapper could disable Sombra's translocator, however, and as seen in Meet the Spy, the Sapper doesn't have to be directly connected to the Sap target to work. The Spy is much more professional than Sombra, and has much more experience than she does. Spy's prepared for just about any situation as well, even keeping a mini butterfly knife on him for in a pinch. I believe Spy would win this fight, as he has the greater experience, at least equal skill in close quarters combat, and greater weaponry than Sombra. Not to mention, Sombra's playful, almost joking nature would no doubt lead to her underestimating Spy, at least at first. Though I won't pretend Spy doesn't have an extreme superiority complex that could get in the way. By the way, Sombra and Junkrat were the only characters from Overwatch here, and Overwatch is the only game that's getting repeated here. Speaking of games, how about we get back to TV shows? Number 5. Now, so far the matchups have been pretty standard, at least as far as concepts go. But now it's time to get a little weird. Bill Cipher's stepping into the ring today, and we're gonna find out who will be at the other end. Let's hit that button and find out. Discord. For me, Dementio's abilities were far too uncertain in their nature for me to feel comfortable suggesting him. Him is a great manipulator, but doesn't have the same sort of near-infinite power that Bill or Discord possess. And Sans? That fight always confused me. Bill Cipher is clearly shown to actually physically change the world around him in any way he wants. While Sans? He changes the rules of his own boss fight, sure, but he didn't show reality warping capabilities, gravity warping at best. On top of that, Bill only needs one hit to kill Sans, while Sans would be fighting him for hours without making any progress. Discord, on the other hand, is very similar to Bill when it comes to abilities. abilities. Both have shown their own capability to alter the world around them in very direct, sometimes disturbing ways, even going as far as altering the creatures around them. Their main difference, which makes this fight very entertaining to think about for me, is their differences in personality and motivation. Discord is a very playful yet malevolent god. He does the things that he does because he finds them funny, because he enjoys laughing at the chaos he wreaks. Bill has an actual tangible goal of being all-powerful, liberating and ruling every dimension he visits. Bill is sinister, Discord is playful, and I feel like they could do a lot with that simple contrast during the fight. But back to who would win. Discord genuinely seems to have greater control over his reality than Bill does, his only restrictions being specific forms of magic and an inability to wish away any magic entirely. He's also been shown literally ripping holes between dimensions, which Bill cannot do without aid. Despite it being very subtle and hard to realize, Discord actually has much better mobility than Bill, as he has the ability to teleport instantly, while Bill has never teleported. You might not believe me, but go back and look. Bill has teleported other objects, but he's never teleported himself anywhere. Bill is the only one of these two to actually show direct destructive capability, however, and that can't be overlooked. Well, actually, despite the TVY rating, MLP did get away with showing Discord throw a chocolate milk grenade behind him. It's not much, but it does show that he's at least capable of dealing damage. One other thing to mention is mind control for either of these characters. Once Bill shakes someone's hand, he's granted the power to fill out the deal made with them. This can include mind control in the case of Stanford. Discord, however, has shown that he's capable of forcible mind control. He clearly prefers manipulation, but it doesn't always work for him. I do believe Discord has a better chance, especially when you remember that he's actually fueled by disharmony, the power of which allowed him to escape his stone prison in Season 2. He simply has a greater level of control over reality. In a fight like this, whoever holds that advantage is probably going to be the victor. Did I mention that, by the way? Both Discord and Bill are ultimately defeated and turned into stone in the process. Isn't that neat? Number 4. We all knew this was coming eventually. As long as Death Battle waits to do this, people will keep desperately asking for it. I tried my best to humor some other newer ideas, but this fight just lingers around in my head. We have Ruby Rose in one corner, and as for who her opponent will be, well, honestly, I think most people could guess that much, but let's hit the button anyway and hope for a surprise. Yeah, no surprises for this one, I'm afraid. Marluxia is too downright powerful for Ruby to handle, not to mention the clones he can create. Speedo Sound Sonoku is very likely faster than Ruby, and thanks to his exploding shurikens, it would probably make the fight very easy for him. Livy Colette is only good for the visual similarities to Little Red Riding Hood, and the fact that she also is shown using a scythe. Other than that, it's kind of an empty fight when you look into it. So that leaves Maka Albarn. This fight is somewhat stagnated as far as how much I enjoy it, due to how much I love the idea and how unfair this fight might be. Ruby's easily faster, absolutely no question about it, especially with the cafeteria scene. No matter how much you try and say she wasn't moving that fast, the shattering of the wall proves that it genuinely was. And maybe it took 15 seconds due to slow motion or repeating footage to give more emphasis. The lifting of the food and tables can be explained away, but the shattering of the wall can't. Ruby also has an edge in durability, most of the time. This is where we hit our first crossroad. Maka has had two very different iterations between the Soul Eater manga and anime. If we were to go with Maka from the manga, it would be a very easy answer to say Maka would win, as she and Soul have shown the ability to calm people's souls, rendering them near useless. This alone is more than enough to beat Ruby, but she also possesses the Black Blood Dress, which is a wearable armor that gives her all the benefits of the Black Blood, minus the insanity, making her nearly invincible to all attacks. However, the version of Maka most are familiar with is from the Soul Eater anime, which doesn't possess this dress, the calming ability, or flight. By the way, did I mention that she can gain the power of flight through both the dress and riding on top of Soul like a broomstick? Either way, the Maka from the anime's greatest durability came from the Black Blood, second of which being her unconscious weapon form, which on top of being durable, allows her to sprout scythe blades from any and every part of her body. If it were strictly anime Maka, I'd say it was a very close match, but due to the rules of Death Battle, I've decided that manga Maka has to be accounted for. That being said, Ruby's possible saving grace might be the Silver Eyes, as it's not certain what exactly they do. If they target and counter magic, then it would certainly give Ruby a chance. But if it's more specific, such as an ability that was meant to counter the maidens, Ruby is completely outclassed. So when considering Maka and Soul from the Soul Eater manga, they would most certainly be able to put down the girl with the silver eyes. But you know, they just weren't durable enough for my taste. How about we get a little denser? Number 3. The story of this matchup is a very funny one, really. It's probably not what you'd expect to hear. When I was making my original top 10 list, I was having a great deal of difficulty coming up with the last few fights. I thought of a character that I wanted to see in Death Battle, and asked one of my friends who he should fight. After listing his abilities, said friend told me he should fight Greed from Fullmetal Alchemist. Maybe not that enthusiastically, but still. But I decided to scrap that matchup from my original list. I didn't know enough about Greed to make any semblance of an argument as for who would win, but I gave the excuse that they weren't characters you'd recognize. Rosie the Rascal versus Harley Quinn made it instead, because Rosie the Rascal is definitely a character that everyone knows. Now, who is this character that I wanted in a death battle? Let's hit that button so you can see for yourself. Senator Stephen Armstrong. As far as the other fights for Greed go, Gilles would work if it weren't for the fact that Greed can pierce his iron skin, making it basically useless. Ban's snatch ability makes it a nearly unwinnable fight for Greed. Brass Body is nothing more than a normal man who can turn his body to brass, and has absolutely no way to kill Greed. Armstrong, on the other hand, well, he might honestly be too powerful for Greed to handle, and that might is what landed this fight so high on the list. My group of friends have had hours worth of debate over this fight, and it all has to do with Greed's armor. Allow me to explain for you. Armstrong is the final boss of Metal Gear Rising, the same game that stars Raiden. Yes, the same Raiden who killed Wolverine. Armstrong is durable enough to both catch and break Raiden's original high-frequency blade in the palm of his hand. He's capable of this through the use of nanomachines, son, which harden in response to any form of physical trauma, which mostly means the tensing of muscles in this case. When hardened, these nanomachines make Armstrong nearly invulnerable, with only Jetstream Sam's Muramasa blade being shown to actually damage them. Even Raiden, punching at full force, could barely make a dent in him. This is the same Raiden who suplexed Metal Gear Excelsis, and he can barely even hurt Armstrong. By the way, Metal Gear Excelsis has been estimated to weigh anywhere from 8,000 to 21,000 metric tons. Huge shout out to the people on the Space Battles forum who did this work when I was too lazy to, especially Goji Raisin and Willy Verib. Oh, and in case you didn't know, Armstrong is also stronger than Raiden, or at the very, very least on par with him. And if you want to make the argument that lifting strength is not equal to striking power, here's Armstrong punching Raiden through Metal Gear Excelsis, blowing it up in the process. And as Death Battles said themselves, Metal Gears were made to survive nuclear war. So you can imagine how strong those punches had to be. None of Greed's feats can compare to these, but where he and Ling have the advantage is in the way their abilities work. specifically with the ultimate shield. Once Greed fully encases himself in it, it's there until he deactivates it. Armstrong has to physically will his armor to activate and stay activated, though without the armor he can still take plenty of hits. This is perhaps a result of his muscles tensing simply as a result of a blade touching his skin, therefore softening the blow anyway. Therefore, Greed's only way to get past the nanomachines is to outspeed Armstrong's reaction speed and hit something vital. That would be incredibly difficult to pull off, however, as Armstrong can actually manage to react in time to grab Raiden's sword out of the air. Greed's regeneration is definitely better, but that doesn't make Armstrong's healing bad by any means, as it's even allowed him to reattach limbs instantly. It's worth noting that if the nanomachines themselves take damage, Armstrong then has to stand still to recharge them. Both fighters run on a limited energy supply, but between the two, Greed's would easily outlast Armstrong's. But for that to happen, the fight would have to go on for literal hours or days. So now we get to talk about Greed's armor. At this point in time, many, including myself, believe Greed's armor to be comparable to graphene, the hardest known form of carbon. A famous feat of real-life graphene is being able to support the weight of an elephant with a sheet as thin as cling film, or saran wrap. So let's use that as a base. A fairly average elephant could weigh about 13,000 pounds, and cling film is normally 0.0127 millimeters thick. The thickest part of the human skin is roughly 4 millimeters thick, and that's what's being turned to graphene. Dividing 4 by 0.0127 gives us our multiplier of 314.96. Applying this to the elephant's weight gives us 4,094,488.18898 pounds, or 2,047 tons. Even with this massive number, Armstrong is still capable of breaking through. If we use the heaviest recorded elephant, which sits at 24,000 pounds, it would still only come out to 3,779 tons, at least half of Armstrong's lifting strength. While Greed is shown to be able to form armor beneath skin level while in Father's body, this is likely detrimental to the host, as it would block many major organs from functioning. He was trying to get Father killed during that scene, after all. In my research, I also discovered that the minimum amount of force to launch someone weighing 300 pounds to orbit is 3,049,482 newtons, whereas Armstrong is capable of lifting and throwing with a force of 71,171,546, clearly dwarfing the previous number. Ling needs air to breathe, but it's likely that Greed can circumvent this through rapidly healing while in space. Due to their bond by the end of Brotherhood, Greed would probably use up all his energy to try and keep Ling alive were they to be in this situation, ending in both of them winding up dead. So yeah, I believe Armstrong has a clear advantage, but the pure amount of data that can go into this fight is too incredible for me to overlook. But now, let's move on. Number 2. While even numbers and data are nice and fun to look at, sometimes you need a bit of zaniness to mix things up. Underdog brings exactly that to the table, and even more. But who, oh who, could this canine fight? Let's press the button and see who just might. Crypto. Stitch is strong and durable, but not strong enough to stand up to Underdog, and not even close to fast enough to keep up with him. Dexstar sadly did not have nearly enough researchable data for me to decide how I feel about him. Supergroove was honestly just a spot filler. His 1 feat is not enough to judge anything about him, really. That leaves Crypto. While to many people this seems like an easy win for Crypto, Underdog does actually match and even surpass him in some regards. Just a disclaimer, in my previous top 10, I was mostly using the movie version of Underdog in my analysis, which is not the full scope of what Underdog can do. In this video, I will only be using 1 feat from that movie. You may know the one. Crypto has the same abilities as Superman, but considerably weaker and less refined. This includes heat vision, X-ray vision, flight, and enhanced physical attributes. Since Krypto is a dog, he does have better hearing and smell than Superman, meaning that it's impossible to sneak up on him. Underdog has the same abilities that I just mentioned: flight, X-ray vision, laser eyes, greater strength and speed, and heightened senses. He also has his trademark Thunder Roar, but honestly, it wouldn't do any good in a fight like this. Underdog is capable of breaking buildings in half, and in the movie, he traveled around the circumference of the planet in under 7 seconds, also taking a pit stop in Asia for some food. Since I only found this out really late into the production of this video, as in, this is the day it's supposed to come out and I'm adding this in really quick, I found out that Underdog in the cartoon actually has gone much, much faster than that. There's one instance where there are these aliens that kidnap Polly and force her to bake on their home planet. They cursed Underdog so that he's trapped in this ball form and can't leave Earth. But then Polly falls into this giant vat of batter, screams for help, and that manages to get Underdog to break out of his spell and go to rescue her. So for one, he heard her through the vacuum of space, and instantly through the vacuum of space, because that's one thing that they mention about this alien race, how far away they are. They say, at the beginning of the episode, they say this twice, they are 1 million light years away. How quickly can Underdog get there? Quickly enough to save Polly from drowning, so at most a minute. And if you're going by the actual in-show time, it took 15 seconds. And I don't think you really need to know how fast that was going. But just in case you want to know, if it did take 15 seconds, that would mean he was traveling 2 trillion times the speed of light. Just let that sink in. Let it sink in. And I thought that going around the circumference of the planet was nice. I thought that was fast. Anyway, continuing on with the video. On top of that, Underdog has the super pill to raise his strength and speed even further. Due to this, and seeing no direct evidence proving otherwise, I'll say that Underdog is the faster of the two. Krypto can likely match Underdog's building destruction feat, however, and it's clearly more durable than his counterpart. But I think the thing that decides this fight is the difference in intelligence. Underdog in every iteration is shown to be clumsy and oftentimes arrogant. Krypto, on the other hand, is repeatedly stated to be extremely intelligent along with all his other abilities. It says it in his theme song and everything. This definitely decides for me that Krypto would win. Not because of vastly better abilities, but rather due to his much greater intelligence. Underdog's powers also have some sort of time limit, making him even more hard-pressed to beat Krypto as fast as possible, which he isn't necessarily capable of doing. And that's it for this one. Now, before we move on to the number 1 slot, here are some honorable mentions. Darkseid vs. Thanos. I said that I wouldn't include this one due to my lack of investment in the characters, but I couldn't go without saying one of the best Marvel vs. DC matchups of all time. Silver vs. Mewtwo. Still just barely out of reach. I just imagine this is a better version of Shadow vs. Mewtwo, basically. Jetstream Sam vs. Adam Taurus. This fight evaded the list due to both series already being represented in the video, and a lack of information on Adam's real abilities. Jason Voorhees vs. Michael Myers. I really wanted to do a battle of the slasher villains, but today just wasn't the day for it. Scarlet Witch vs. Raven. Still a good matchup, but not good enough to contend with the other fights here. Now, without further ado, let's wrap this video up. You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path along. Number 1. We've been through some highs and lows, some ups and downs, but I hope that you agree with the list up to this point. This last matchup is one that I left as a complete mystery, not even appearing on the chart. So let's press the button and end this video off right. Mephiles the Dark vs. Well, that can't be right. This obviously isn't the correct fight, but while that's getting cleared up, let's briefly talk about these two. They each hail from a particularly disappointing Sonic game. One a definitively bad game, the other being very, mediocre. They also share more abilities than they reasonably should. Dark energy attacks, flight, cloning, being edgy as fuck. If it were to be a fight, Mephiles would win due to his much greater durability and his control over time. It seems as though the issue is cleared up now, so let's move on to the real number 1. Cole McGrath versus Alex Mercer. This fight was number 1 on my last list, and now it's number 1 again, because I love the idea of this fight. They're so similar while being so different. They've been in the same situations but made completely different choices canonically. We have to use Good Cole for this fight due to the death battle rules, and while at one point I thought that was a bad thing, now I think that it's an improvement. And while my opinion on who would win hasn't changed, I hope that today I'll give a much better rundown of why. Alex is faster, stronger, and more durable than Cole, with better lethal weaponry to bring him down. Where Cole redeems that fact is in his near-infinite supply of electricity to refuel himself. Even if we were to set this fight in the middle of the desert, Cole has been proven to be able to summon lightning storms in the past and drain power straight from the clouds. Though the fight would no doubt be set in the midst of a city, the city's electricity is not a crutch for Cole. In fact, it would help Alex more being in a city, giving him civilians to consume for health and a way to blend into the background. While Alex has thermal vision to track Cole, Cole has the radar pulse ability to scan the area for electric signals, which includes neuroelectric energy inside living beings. Point being, if Alex tried to use a spike protrusion from beneath Cole to finish it quickly, Cole would see it coming. Cole is also much better at range, as the only thing Alex can do is throw vehicles or use his whip to close the distance. Cole has grenades, rockets, gravity-altering shockwaves, and ice variations of any of those. He also has the Gigawatt blades, which I can't stress enough are a huge asset to Cole in this fight. As seen in the infamous comic book, these blades have exemplary cutting ability, and would definitely be able to cut off Alex's limbs in the same way Heller did. His ice abilities also help, as they could freeze Alex in place or even make it easier to dismember him. Now to address Alex's regeneration. It's true that he did come back from a nuclear explosion, but when you think about what happened, he was dead, at least for a short period of time. Also, he came back by consuming a small bird, which likely gave him enough power to consume larger and larger creatures, until he eventually remade himself. I don't know if that would be considered outside help, but it's worth noting. I believe if Cole were to do exactly what Heller did, Death Battle would consider it his victory, regardless of if Alex could come back. They did this very same thing with Kratos versus Spawn, where Spawn killed Kratos and won, but Kratos still had the ability to return by conquering Hades yet again. The place, not the guy. Alex does have ways to avoid or block most of Cole's ranged attacks, such as the shield or armor abilities, and some insane reaction times. Those reaction times are not supersonic, however. Since they're present on the Death Battle wiki, I'll address these calculations of how fast Elizabeth's Crimson Shockwave was. Looking at the picture given and assessing the perspective, Elizabeth is much closer to 3 stories than 4. Alex is also not capable of surviving a nuke. The nuke blew him apart, and he had to reform himself afterwards. The only thing that's proven by bringing that up is that the Crimson Shockwave is much weaker than a nuke. Although, besides that, I agreed with the calculation of Elizabeth's mass. Regardless, I feel the whole calculation is moot at that point. Also, scaling Alex to Roland is unfair, as the different characters are prone to have slightly different abilities and stats. Perhaps Roland is simply really fast compared to the others. I do believe Cole would win, as his BioLeech would be able to drain the virus of any neuroelectric charge it had, making it unable to continue to function. That makes Cole's only challenge actually holding Alex still long enough to make the BioLeech possible, and his ice abilities and arc restraints seem like more than enough to me. This is the battle that I'm sure the most people will disagree on, and I'm fully prepared for any ensuing arguments. I just hope that I explained my position better this time around. And hey, with that, we've reached the end of the video. I'd love to make this a yearly tradition. I can't promise next year, however, because I can't promise that I'll have come up with any new matchups by then, and I don't want to repeat lists. But you know, for the most part, I really enjoyed making this one, although procrastination mixed with a part-time job made it fairly stressful to put together. But I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, that makes it all worth it. If you guys have any death battles that you'd want to see, why don't you leave a comment down below so we can all sit around and chat about it. Also, really quick, I wanted to give a random, possibly alarming update in the fact that I want to rebrand this channel. I don't mean changing the content I make, I just want to drift away from the name of Redrunner. Redrunner was a character I made years and years ago, just sprouted from my childhood imagination, but I fear he's become an icon to represent me. That's not what I wanted. Hello everyone, I'm Michael. I'm the real creator behind all the Redrunner content that you see. And I have a few questions for you. 1. How would you guys feel about a channel rebranding? 2. What do you think my new name should be? 3. Sort of rendering number 2 a bit moot. What do you think of the channel name Random Thoughts? This channel name would bring with it a new series where I would just talk about interesting things of the week, and also applies to my reactionary content with the thoughts part of it. I'll leave some polls up in the corner for you to share your opinions with me. Feel free to leave a comment with specific thoughts if you have them. So, anyway, if you liked this video, you can leave a like and share it with your friends. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike and tell me what displeased you. I want all the feedback I can get. If you want to see more videos from me in the future, then you can subscribe to the channel, and I will see all of you in the next video.